world is us, and we are not getting in this war. We do not want any part of it. Okay. And so the British are going to have to hold off the Germans. And Friday, when we watched that movie, the video, the Battle of Britain video, we saw really militarily how the British were able to hold off the Germans. Okay. And that was through the air. Okay. So I'm not sure if you've had this slide yet. Okay. What we see here, guys, is German aircraft losses per 6-month period. So the first one on this chart is 1940, May to December. So what you watched in the video on Friday, you saw 71% of the German Luftwaffe destroyed in that 6-month period. The Germans never achieved air superiority over the English Channel or southern England, which means the invasion could not take place. Operation Sea Lion. Okay. Now, that 71%, guys, the Germans are going to be replacing their aircraft. You destroy their aircraft, they're building new ones. Okay. All the countries will do that. When our aircraft get destroyed, we're building new ones. So at the time, that was 71% of their entire air force was destroyed. That's not good for the Germans. Okay, so they give up on Britain. And soon, Thursday, we'll move into the Germans invading Russia. Okay, which he said he would always do. Right, but before we do that, I want to share a little bit with you about the Battle of Britain, both the military side and the civilian side. Okay, now this is another famous photograph of Winston Churchill. Everybody knows what this means, right? Peace, right? Peace, brother, peace, peace. What's this mean? Deuces. Deuces. What's this mean? V. V for victory. Okay? That's what Churchill's doing here. V for victory. Okay? Now, then you can have peace. Flip it. Flip the deuces, right? Right. Actually, guys, if you were to go to London today and you were to do this, you might get slapped.
Why is that?
Because this in London today means this. No, I just flipped off my 4th hour here. Okay. This means this. Back in the day, and Churchill was aware of this, okay? But back in the day, before guns, when armies would fight, you would have archers, those that fire bows and arrows like this, right? And you use these 2 fingers. When they would capture the archers, they would cut these 2 fingers off so that they could not any longer fire a bow and arrow, okay? So the British would do this to mock their enemies by saying, we still have these 2 fingers. You don't. You get it? That's a real thing. Any guys heard of that before? See what you learn in history class?
I know in Germany it's this.
This means this in Germany? Okay, don't do that. In the United States, it means white supremacy. Yeah, it's a white supremacy sign.
This is okay, but then if it's like that,
Okay.
it's closer.
So
It's like
this,
Something like that, that's okay. It's like that. I think.
if
I
it's
don't,
closed in Germany?
well, or just like,
Okay.
I don't know
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. You'll catch somebody. I don't know. You guys ever seen this? Ooh, gotcha. You guys play that game? We played it in the 80s. That's great. I was with my buddies, in Orlando. Sure enough, David. That's funny. Okay. All right, so militarily, guys, it's fairly simple. The British had a couple advantages over the Germans in this Battle of Britain. Okay, and the big advantage was this, right? The British Supermarine Spitfire. I think the video kind of talked about that, right? And I've talked about it. You've got the elliptical wing here, which is in the 1,000 horsepower Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. This thing is fast, it's maneuverable, it's a better plane than the Messerschmitt, okay, the German counterpart. Now, with advanced warning, the British, they hid their planes, they camouflaged them because they knew the Germans would try and destroy their planes on the ground. But they didn't, because British had early warning, because somebody invented radio detecting and ranging, or radar. Radio detecting and ranging. You send out radio waves, it hits an object and it reverberates back. And then you figure out a way to measure that. Okay, which again is why smart people are important. Okay, now the guy that actually invented radar in Britain, there's a movie on Netflix about it. Okay, and he's a meteorologist. And he literally has to lie, cheat, and steal equipment to figure this out. Okay, he literally steals the equipment from the government to try and figure out radar. Okay, and he does, thankfully. And so every time the Germans showed up, these planes were already in the sky. Now the video did a good job about showing, you got 5 minutes takes for the planes to cross the channel. It takes about 4 minutes to get these planes in the air, and then try to get them to climb to the altitude that the Germans are coming in. So this was like you literally sprint to your plane, got up in the air as fast as you could. All right, and they were suffering large amounts of planes as well. The British were losing planes and losing pilots. And guys, you can build one of these in a couple of weeks, but you can't train a pilot in a couple of weeks. You need months to train a pilot. So they encouraged these pilots to eject. If they thought they were going to get shot down, their plane was damaged, get out of the plane. There were days where these pilots ejected over the English Channel, were picked up by a boat, and back in the air the same day. Okay, there were some of those days where the Germans sent wave after wave. They had to do that. Okay, and so it is really these British pilots, along with some Polish and Czech pilots and a few Americans, that are going to save the day here. But militarily, radar is really the big leap forward here, and the aircraft. Okay. Now, if you were to look up where and when radar was invented, the Japanese actually invented it about the same time as the British did. Okay, so it wasn't. I don't know if you can give it to like one person at one time that invented it, that you could credit with it, but certainly, there's people you can thank for it. Okay. Now, as you know, this radar is much more primitive than what we have today, where, KSN News, weathercast person, they can look at the radar and see a tornado in the radar. Okay, like, oh, you should be looking out. There's a tornado right there. You can see it in the radar. Okay. As an amateur, if you've watched the news enough, you can learn how to read the radar a little bit too. But anyhow, so militarily, guys, the RAF, the Royal Air Force, and radar are going to prevent Operation Sea Lion from going forward. The Germans will not invade. Okay. Now, second hour, first hour, I had passed around a paper that I wrote in 2005, and somehow it never got back to me. Oh, there it is. So the year you were born, I was in graduate school, okay, in 2005, and I wrote this paper. It's called Citizen Fortress Britain. citizen survival tactics and home defensive measures during the Battle of Britain. Okay? I did a lot of research. These are all the sources I used for this paper. Okay? Now, I got a 93% on it. Okay? Pretty good. You know. Pass this around. So what I'm going to tell you about today is a lot of the stuff I found writing this paper. Okay? About how the citizens dealt with this situation. It's a 6-month battle. But for the people, they called it the Blitz. Okay, so if you were a civilian in Britain, there's 48 million Britons, right? What are they going to do with 3 million of the children? They're going to send them off to the countryside. I think the numbers in there something like 26,000 British estates in the countryside are requisitioned by the government to take in these children. Now, ladies, your age, 17, 18, 19 years old, you're needed. Most of the men, the young men in here, would be in uniform. Okay? What are you going to do? What we need you to do is go to the farms, because the old men need help on the farms, and it's going to be young women that do the work, the labor on the farms. If you're a woman in your late 20s or 30s, you're going into the factories. You're going to be building these planes, okay? Because most of the young men of working age are in uniform, okay? So the elderly, they will have a role with the home guard to make sure that blackouts are blackouts, okay? Any of you guys ever flown at night? You can see where the cities are. If you look out the window, they're all lit up. So guys, once the Germans stopped trying to bomb the airfields, and that didn't work, they started bombing the cities at night with incendiary bombs, bombs that will cause fires. So the British did everything they could to keep all the lights off in the cities. And I mean all the lights, all the train cars, the windows were blacked out. You were not allowed to emit any light from your home. If you did, the old men in the home guard would come by and fine you and berate you, okay, because it was dangerous. All the street lamps, street lights were turned off. Headlamps of automobiles covered. Now, if you read that paper, there's a lot of accidents that happen because of the blackouts. People can't see. It's pitch black in the cities. So, like, people falling off curbs, breaking their ankles, falling into the river, drowning. Stories like that, okay? We practiced blackouts in Wichita during World War II. We didn't know, guys, after Pearl Harbor, we didn't know if we were going to get hit. New York City, Manhattan, they practiced blackouts. They shut all the lights off, okay? So this is something that the British took extremely seriously, okay? So what are the citizens going to do? Well, they're going to work. They're going to be part of the home guard, okay, and survive. That's their job. So this map right here kind of shows you different routes that the Germans used to bomb Britain. So from Denmark, Norway, of course, France, Belgium, they would attack from all angles, okay? So the radar was all along the coastline in the south, and then they had listening posts and watchers to tell you, like, what direction the planes were going, what altitude they were at, those sorts of things. Okay, so and all of that information is fed into a central hub in London that they showed in the video. And I don't know if you noticed, that was young women that were on the headsets getting this information. They were in communication with squadron leaders on the radio. So when these guys got shot or, hit, women on the radio could hear this, like guys going down, screaming in agony and stuff like that. So it was very powerful. This you saw in the video as well. This is the Messerschmitt versus the Spitfire. And then this is over the southern coast of England. And you probably saw some white cliffs. England has these very tall cliffs in parts of the southern border. Who? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So, just some pictures here. The one on the top right, this is part of that quote from Churchill. Never was so much owed by so many to so few, the pilots of the RAF. Now, here's the thing, guys. Churchill stayed in London during the Blitz. So when they were bombing London, Churchill was there with the people. This picture is taken after a night of bombing in London. You can see Churchill out amongst the people. You know who else stayed in London during the bombing? The royal family stayed. Now, the royal family did send some of the family jewels to Canada, gold and famous arts of work, works of art, other valuable things they sent in case the Germans invaded. They sent that stuff to Canada. But the royal family stayed. They could have left. There were people that wanted Churchill to surrender. They wanted people, that they were pressuring him to make a deal with Hitler. Churchill's like, no, we're not doing that. Guys, after 6 months of bombing, there's a lot of people that want to quit. He's not going to let that happen. Okay? Now, I think I asked about this maybe earlier. There's a movie called The King's Speech. Anybody? Okay. So forgive me here. I think the king's name is not William. I forget the king's name. But anyhow, his older brother was the king. And his older brother had this affair with this commoner woman. And he abdicated the throne and moved to France with this woman. So I think it's Prince or King, not William, it's King Andrew. I think it's King Andrew. Okay. Churchill's giving these speeches on the radio, right? But the people of Britain need to hear from their king. Problem is, he stutters. He's got a really bad stutter. You ever known anybody with a stutter? You actually have? Okay. So they bring in all these speech pathologists for the king to try and get him so he can give a speech to the people and not come off as sounding really weak, and stuttering and stammering through the speech. And so that's what this whole movie's about. And none of these speech pathologists can help it. So they find this kind of quack, this guy that uses unconventional methods to help people with stuttering. Okay? Those of you that raise your hand, was that you that had stuttering problems? Any of you? Okay. So this guy that uses unconventional methods, these methods are kind of funny. So you know how the royal family is, they're all prim and proper and so forth. But the method they use is to scream cuss words, like get them really angry and just start cussing every word in the book. And to see the King of England just letting it loose like this is funny. The movie is very well done, okay? It's worth your time. If you ever see it come across, the King's Speech, watch it. It's really good, okay? And in the end, the king is able to get through like a 5-minute speech without stammering and sputtering. Okay, it's really good speech, and I think it's Andrew. Okay, so anyhow, they stay there, and I want to show you this. If you ever go to London, there's lots of tourist places to go. Okay, but one you want to go is the War Cabinet Rooms. It's very inconspicuous. There's a row of apartments, and then there's a park. You go around the end of the apartments, down under the stairs, and this is where Churchill ran the war. Okay? What's cool about it is the day the war ended in 1945, they left the rooms exactly as they were. So it's like stepping back into 1945. Now there's a big map room in there where, here's where the troops are and everything. And then in that room is Churchill's bed. He liked to stay up late. He liked to drink. He liked to smoke. Okay, Churchill's a character. Okay, so he would stay up late and then work from his bed till about 11 o'clock and then get out of bed. Okay, and so if you get a chance, if you're ever in London, check out these rooms. I'll pass this around. Come on in.
Hi,
What's up?
this is from the office for Michael.
Did your mom bring your lunch?
No, it's for life.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Mr. Regret.
No, it's fine.
Have a great day.
Congratulations on your All City thing.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
You're welcome. I don't know her, but she knows me. What's her name?
Sophia.
Sophia what?
Smith.
Myth?
Smith.
Smith. Isaac?
Isaac Smith.
Do I know Isaac Smith?
He's in the blue community.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, she's nice. Okay. All right, next slide. All right, so what are some of the other things they do to try to defend themselves as civilians, okay? Now, I was disappointed in the movie on this. They didn't show, do you guys remember seeing these? These barrage balloons in the film? Yeah, it's disappointing. Okay. They're called barrage balloons. Okay, and if you open up a book on World War II, you'll see a lot of these. Okay. Now, they have helium in them, so they stay up like my birthday balloons over there. Okay. And now, if you're a German pilot flying during the daylight hours, you think you can avoid these? You could probably even shoot them down. Yes? Yeah. Okay. Now, the thing about these balloons, if I were to draw one of these, is this. This is a steel cable. Okay, so you put these up around high-value targets like radar stations. Remember the Stuka dive bomber? You don't want to fly into a bunch of barrage balloons, dive bomb, with these steel cables. Because if your wing hits one of those, it's going to send you into a spin or rip the wing off. Okay, so they were more for preventative purposes than anything else. At the peak, they had over 2,100 of these balloons flying over Britain. Okay, they were everywhere. And it would take like 5 people, could be women, could be men, 5 people would put these things up. Now, the other thing you could do is set these at a certain altitude. So, say 8,000 feet. So when German bombers would come in, they would want to fly above the balloons. Now, if you're shooting anti-aircraft shells that, remember flak, okay, blowing up, and you know that the balloons are at 8,000 feet, and the Germans are flying just above that, you can get your shells to explode at 8,000 feet or 9,000 feet, and you have more accuracy with your anti-aircraft weapons. Does that make sense? Plus, guys, after a night of bombing, you wake up, you come outside, and you see these. You know you're doing something to try and defend yourselves, okay? So that's your barrage balloons. Now, this is an Anderson shelter. You guys have seen Narnia. At the very beginning of the movie, there's an air raid, and the family runs into the backyard. Okay, remember Edward goes back in and tries to get Dad's picture. You dig a hole in your backyard about 3 feet deep, and anybody that requests one of these, the government would give them. You put it together, it's corrugated steel, you bolt it together at the top. And if there was air raid sirens going off, you don't want to be in your home, because if your home gets hit, it's going to fall on you and you're going to die. So you run to the backyard, get in your Anderson shelter. Now, the one in the movie Narnia is really nice. Like, it's got carpet on it and stuff like that. Most weren't like that. And it rains a lot in England, and so you would get mud in there. If you had food stored in there, you get rats and different rodents, cats, stray cats and stuff. But if you go to London today, you'll still see these in people's backyards. They just have like gardens growing around them and stuff like that, okay? But those are Anderson shelters. So as the Germans switched to bombing the cities, they would bomb at night, and they would use incendiary bombs to cause fires. Occasionally, they would bomb during low tide, making it more difficult to get water out of the rivers to put out the fires. Okay, but you had, big fire departments during this time period, volunteers to help try and put out these fires. Okay, so now if you could afford it, you might choose to get, instead of an Anderson shelter outside, you might choose to get a Morrison shelter. Now, a Morrison shelter is like a steel box. Okay, now that's expensive during war to buy steel. So this is more for the wealthy. You put your mattress in there and some chicken wire, and if the bomb hits your house and the house collapses on your Morrison shelter, it's going to hold. You just got to wait for somebody to dig you out. The comforts of home. Okay, radar station here. And guys, they did have air raid shelters for people, but maybe not enough room for everybody. So people would go into the tube. This is the subway. The government did not encourage people to do this, but people just wanted to get underground. The problem with these is that a lot of these tubes are built just a few feet under the roads. So if a bomb, 500-pound bomb hits the road, this is all going to collapse in on the people. And that did happen. Okay. Another place you don't want to hide during a bombing raid is under a bridge. Okay, because bridges are often targets of a bombing raid. And if you're under the bridge, well, okay. Now, with the blackouts, you hope the Germans don't find the cities, but if they do, and you hear them above you, they'll break out the spotlights. The spotlights are going to try and spot the bombers so that you can shoot at them with anti-aircraft guns. Okay, so they would wait. If the bombers made it over the city, they would unleash these lights. Here's a good picture of a spotlight. Now, you guys have all seen that in Batman, right? Spot. Have you ever seen one in real life? You have? Where? In the theater? Like they did it outside the theater?
Oh, no.
Oh. Yeah, Mikey, I've been waiting for you all day. I knew it. When they opened the Spangles downtown, this is about, 15 years ago. Your aunt, they had the spotlight, and I live in northeast Wichita, and this spotlight was downtown Wichita, going up in the air like that, because it's a grand opening type thing.
They got one right now that has 4.
Like 4 in 1?
Yeah, 4 like they'll shoot.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Use it for grand openings and stuff?
They haven't used it in years.
Yeah. Well, I remember the last time they did.
That's crazy.
It was a Spangles.
My
Yeah.
mom's gonna love that actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in northeast Wichita. I don't know how long that Spangles has been downtown, but I think it was downtown. And
Yeah, they were like doing them out for a while.
yeah. They're not running them out anymore? Well, maybe you should
They
get.
were trying to get me to take it over actually.
Yeah, dude, side job. Got a grand opening? Rent this from me. $500 a night. And then you keep, 200. Let's go, Mikey. They're cool. You should just get it for, you should bring it for
Basketball games.
prom. Get out of the cotillion.
Put it on top of your truck.
They just get that thing fired up so you can work.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been waiting on you all day just to talk about that. Okay. All right. So you can see the pictures of the kids here, guys. this is kind of a sad part of it, a sad story, because the kids, 3 million of them went off. And here's the thing, as soon as the invasion of Poland started in September of 39, that's when they started sending the kids off. You get an ID badge, you get one suitcase, and then you see these little boxes right here that the kids are carrying? Those are gas masks. So British were worried that, they used poisonous gas in World War I. Both sides did. They're worried that the Germans were going to use poisonous gas again. So every British citizen, including the children, were given a gas mask if they requested one. Okay? And these kids were all given gas masks. Okay? It's kind of sad. Now, remember after the invasion of Poland, the phony war for 6 months, there was no fighting going on in Europe. So all these kids had gone off to the countryside for 6 months. No bombs had fallen. Nothing had happened. Okay, and then it took a while for Germany to take over those 6 European countries before they actually started bombing Britain. So we're talking here, like 8 months, the kids are gone, and there's no bombing. So some of the kids, they escaped the estates and went home to try and find mom and dad. And they went back to the cities. Mom was working in some factory somewhere. Dad was in uniform. These kids went back to the cities and they didn't have any parents. So in that paper I wrote about, you have these bands of kids, like 6 to 12 years old running around with no parental supervision. They're like little hooligans. They're like stealing food, breaking into places and so forth. They call British soccer fans and Russian soccer fans hooligans. Okay. It's little hooligans running around. Okay. So anyhow, this is the British ACAT gun, the anti-aircraft gun. Okay. And it became very effective at shooting down German bombers. Now, the British are going to get creative. Now, this is called a parachute and rocket system. Okay? So what you do, you have all these rockets. Let's say you're trying to protect an airfield. Put out this row of rockets like this, and say an air raid comes to the airfield. So fire these rockets up into the air. Each one has a little parachute on it. Basically building a wall of steel cables. So if a dive bomber comes in, wing hits this, it brings down the plane. In all the research I did on these things, I found of one instance where this actually worked. And it ripped the wing off a plane, it crash landed, the pilot survived, and the townspeople came out and pounced on the pilot. Okay, one time, all this worked. Now the Germans, they got creative too, and they tried to build these little, like, knives on the front of their planes to cut through the cables. Okay, it didn't turn out too well for this one. Okay. Now, from creative to medieval. I know way too much about this story, okay? So, if you look at Britain, okay, the Thames River runs here up into London. It's a big river, okay? And the White Cliffs of England along certain parts of this coast are very tall. So if the Germans were to bring in landing craft to invade on water, they wouldn't do it where the cliffs are, because then they would have to scale the cliffs, you understand? So the British had a pretty good idea where they might land if they landed. So in preparation, you guys know what PVC pipe is, that white plastic piping? They got all this PVC pipe, they drilled holes in it, okay, and then they put it out into the water. And in the case of a German invasion by sea, They could pump oil into that PVC pipe. It would coat the surface of the water, and then you ignite it. Now, I'm glad the Germans didn't think of this on D-Day when we landed at France. You know what I mean? Because if your boat is in the middle of that, everybody's dead. You know what I mean? Okay. Now, I know we live in Kansas, but if you're ever on the water and you see this sticking out of the water and it's red or green, what is it? It's a buoy. Okay? And if you're ever driving a boat and there's a red buoy and a green buoy, you stay between the red and the green. That's where it's deep and you won't run aground. If you get outside the red or the green buoy, it's shallow and your boat's going to hit the ground and you're going to stop really fast. Then they're done that. Okay. It's kind of frightening when you hit the ground. Okay. Now, underneath this inconspicuous buoy is a large platform, okay, and these big pontoons that are filled with water. In the case of the German Navy, coming up the Thames River, you would pump that water out, and this would rise up out of the sea like that, and you've got machine guns and artillery on the top to fire down on the German Navy. Those are still sitting in the Thames River today. That's pretty creative. Yes? Medieval, where you have the slopes, not cliffs, but slopes down to the beaches. They took old 55-gallon drums, like oil drums, coated them with lime, which is flammable. In the case of the Germans, to land, they would have all these barrels lined out that they could ignite and roll down the hills at the Germans. Golf was invented in Scotland and England, so they have lots of golf courses. And that's an easy way for, like, if an army's going to move with tanks across, it's easy to move across wide open spaces like golf courses. So the British emptied the junkyards. Cars, trucks, refrigerators, all kinds of stuff. And they lined the golf courses with all this junk to make it hard for an advancing army to move across. They tore down every sign on the island, every road sign, every sign, Liverpool 30 miles that way, kilometers that way. They tore them all down. In case the Germans used paratroopers, they landed, they wouldn't know where the hell they were. Okay, they did everything humanly possible to survive. 48 million people. And to me, that's an intriguing story. So when I had an opportunity to write a paper about something, or multiple papers about something in my European history class, I wrote about the Battle of Britain. And now you know what I know. Good? So the British will survive. And one day, in God's good time, as Churchill said, the New World, with all its power and might, will be able to amass our army on the island of Britain and liberate Europe from Nazism. Okay? It will come at a high cost of human life. Okay? So, we got to come back across the pond for a little bit because it's time for another election. Roosevelt, originally elected in 32, re-elected in 36, is going to run again for a third term. This is unprecedented. Unprecedented. Okay? So, do the Republicans have any chance? The answer is no. So the Republicans need another sacrificial lamb. This time, instead of Alf Landon, the governor of Kansas, we're going to have Wendell Willkie as the Republican nominee. Okay? Of course, the Republicans don't like the New Deal. But what's most important here, guys, is that they both have the same foreign policy. The Democrats don't want war. The Republicans don't want war. Republicans are more isolationist than the Democrats at this point. Okay? But they both agree that we should start preparing just in case. So in the 1940 presidential campaign, both parties are united, which is huge, that both parties are united, that we need a draft. That's what conscription means. To draft young men into the military and start training them for war. Okay? Now, this passes in September, the election's in November, so both parties are on board with this. They will start drafting men between the ages of 18 and 35 into military conscription. And they quickly realize that drafting 35-year-olds is not a good idea. Why? What? They have families? They have important jobs in the community? They're out of shape? They're fixed in the things they believe in? Where you take an 18-year-old and draft them in, and you tear them down, and then build them back up the way you want them to be. That's what you do in the military. Okay? And you get them to think like you want them to think. Okay? So they'll stop drafting guys in their 30s pretty quickly. Okay? And then it just keeps dropping down. Now, guys, I'll tell you this. During the war, during World War II, I think it's something like 16 million Americans will wear the uniform. 16 million. Okay? At the end of the war, we had 12 million people in uniform. And that's men and women. Okay? We'll discuss a little bit later some of the roles that women play in uniform. Okay? Obviously, we talked about women in the factories and so forth. Okay? So, that's where we will end off today. I'll show you an electoral college map on Thursday. Okay? If anybody needs to retake the map quiz, you need to show up in house on Thursday. Okay? Good? All right. The Blitz.